Tents have been around for over 40,000 years, so imagine being a product engineer at Summit and being tasked with reinventing the tent and coming up with all kinds of innovative, useful, groundbreaking ideas that no one has thought of in those 420 centuries. Pretty stressful. And then imagine people on YouTube going over each and every novel idea that you've thought of and deciding whether it's genius or a gimmick.
It's enough to make a grown man cry.
Yeah, let's start with a random little thing. The tent poles are stored in this narrow bag that has some kind of plastic in it, and honestly, I almost threw that away when unpacking everything the first time, but it's actually a reflector that you can use together with the bag as a kind of light fixture, because it's meant to hold your headlamp and give you a softer overhead light source. I want to say it's a gimmick, but I can see how it's nice to have your whole tent lit instead of just where you're pointing your headlamp. Now, that won't really matter on regular hiking days when you won't be spending that much time in your tent, but on rainy days, especially if you use it with two people and you don't want to blast the other person in the face with your headlamp, yeah, okay, I can see the appeal. So let's give the light bar a 3. I joked in the intro about reinventing the tent, but of course the whole tent market is dominated by only a handful of designs. Not because of some sinister monopoly, but because they represent what works. And so the TR2 follows in the footsteps of a lot of freestanding, semi-freestanding tent designs with an X or Y-shaped structure that the inner hangs from and that the outer goes on top of. And this tension ridge, as Summit calls it, is a variation on that design where the horizontal bar that you usually have in a domed hiking tent actually bends upward in a Y shape to give you more headspace as well as very vertical walls. And maybe it's because I've been spending a lot of time in mid-shaped single wall tents where the walls are pretty aggressively sloped and you only have some space in the middle of the tent where you can sit up straight. But I was actually surprised at how much I enjoyed the living space in the TR2. I can see two people sitting more or less comfortably in this tent facing each other. On a rainy day with two people, there's definitely worse places to be. So I'm giving this a 5. Maybe it's not genius in the Albert Einstein sense of the word, but it's a good design choice that improves livability in a real way, and that's gotta be worth something. The idea of splitting up your gear to be able to each carry half the weight, on the other hand, it's rather gimmicky to me, since there are tons of ways to distribute weight. Just have one person carry the tent and the other person carry the sleeping pads. Boom, you've divided the weight. And so this fair share storage is a solution in search of a problem. That doesn't mean, however, that having 2 or 3 separate smaller packages can be useful, especially if you don't have the standard large backpack. In fact, Summit have made a separate bike packing edition of this tent, which is kind of a genius move in itself because it plays into the strengths of this design as well as into the strengths of Summit as a company, because they are a market leader in dry bags, and the bikepacking version comes with 2 of those that you can strap to either side of your front wheel, keeping your center of gravity nice and low. So that is a clear win. Also, the fact that they've split up the inner and the outer is kind of nifty because it makes it very easy to only take one or the other, and if you don't know why you'd want to do that, well, we'll get to that later. The bags can be used as storage containers on top of the pockets that are already in the side corners. And they also sell a gear loft accessory that gives you an extra shelf. I myself am more of a who needs storage kind of person, but then again, I hardly ever use a 2-person tent as an actual 2-person tent. So I pretty much always have room to spare. And for people using this tent with 2, I do understand how this could be useful. So let's give it a 3.5. Summit markets the TR2 as the pinnacle of tent versatility. And yeah, part of that is just typical of this kind of tent design, like the fact that you can choose to use the inner without the outer in dry weather. But Summit did add a few wrinkles and one genuinely new mode. First thing that is slightly newish is the fact that you can roll up the outer tent onto the tension ridge so you can deploy it quickly and cover everything up if it starts to rain unexpectedly. It's a bit like having a convertible car with a roof that closes extra quickly. Useful enough. 2 is a fly-only mode that, unlike many tents, works without a ground sheet, kind of like a tarp for beginners setup. And that can be useful in a number of scenarios, mostly of course in situations where you don't need an inner because there is no bugs, which is not the case very often on the hikes that we do, so I didn't really get to test that out in the real world. All I can say is that setting it up works as advertised. The real new mode, the poster boy hero shot for the versatility of this tent, is Hangout mode. And Sea to Summit says Hangout mode will change the way you camp. I don't know about that. I do think there's a number of situations where this might be a godsend. For example, if you're in a very open camp spot, blazing sun, no shade whatsoever, you have a lot of time to kill with some friends, then absolutely you're gonna love the ability to build a shelter against the sun. Or if you're in the pouring rain, no bugs, no wind, beautiful surroundings, yeah, sure, you're gonna have a great time in Hangout mode. How often is that gonna happen? Well, that depends on the kind of camping that you do. I haven't needed it this hiking season. I set it up to film it. I like the idea, and maybe one day it'll make me very happy if I remember how to set it up and I don't forget my trekking poles. So even if Hangout mode won't actually change the way you camp, on the whole, I'm gonna give the TR2 a 4 for versatility just because there is nothing gimmicky about a tent that you can take on pretty much all your 3-season trips, and that'll adapt to the weather and to what you wanna do. So after using it for a while, I would argue that the TR2 is not as gimmicky as I thought it would be. And there's some real quality of life upgrades here if you are the kind of person who cares about the details. Now, obviously, those details don't matter unless the TR2 is also a solid, dependable product. So let's go over some of the basics, some of the questions that we haven't touched upon. Is it waterproof? I've had this tent up for days in pretty heavy rain, and as far as I can tell, it is very solidly waterproof. I left the apex vent half open close to the depth, 25% at either side, and there was no infiltration whatsoever. Now, I'm not gonna guarantee you that it is storm-proof just because I haven't tested that. It does inspire confidence, it's pretty sturdy, but it is a bit higher than other tents as well, so it's bound to catch a bit more wind. I'll update you in the comments if we ever get caught in a storm with it. Is it durable? The fabric of the outer tent is a 15 denier ripstop nylon, so not a very thick, heavy-duty material, but of course that's to be expected for such a light tent. Nylon means that it may sag a little in the rain, it's going to absorb a bit more water than other fabrics like polyester or Dyneema, but it is nice and stretchy, it's durable, easy to pitch, very abrasion resistant. I like the fly as well, very little snagging, usable with one hand in most spots. Now, if there is one thing that I'm a little skeptical about in terms of durability, it's the tent floor. Made from a 20 denier nylon, I do know that it's easy to patch. I know that you can use a footprint like the one the Sea to Summit sells, but I guess I just want the floor of a tent to feel sturdy enough and have that extra footprint be a luxury, an extra safety rather than something that I need to bring to feel like it's gonna be okay. And that is a pity, especially for a rather expensive tent like the TR2. They do have a 5-year warranty, at least if you buy through their website, so that might help remedy some of the sticker shock. There's a couple of other small things that I like. I'll just throw them on the screen so as not to waste your time. So, final thoughts, I have been placing a big premium on weight in my tent choices these last few years, so I doubt this will be my main hiking tent going forward. But it has opened my eyes to the importance of livability and convenience and versatility, you know, the simple stuff done well. So for things like bikepacking, which we've been planning for a long time but never really seemed to get around to, I would definitely look forward to sleeping in a tent like this and be pretty confident that it will deliver whatever the weather throws at us. I guess it's kind of funny that it takes a slightly over-engineered product like this to make a man reappreciate the basics. It's a solid, versatile choice for people looking for a double-wall tent, pretty standard in terms of setup speed, pretty standard dimensions, so probably not for people over 6'2", 188 centimeters. Light without being ultralight, but yeah, versatile, lots of livable space, and dare I say it, pretty innovative. There you have it. Here's to the next 40,000 years.